Hey folks, welcome to Verified Investing. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here. In today's video, we're going to dive into some altcoins, namely Ethereum. We're going to look at Solana, XRP, and maybe a couple others that are showing some interesting signs of potential pullbacks, but potential buying opportunities on those pullbacks. All right, so let's dive into the ETH chart here and take a look. This is something I've shown you guys recently, how Ethereum or ETH is trading within multiple parallels. And it's amazing how all of these parallels, they're all with major levels. And so again, you can see whether it's this line right here, which is kind of the obvious base point, and then you bring a line up here that's parallel and you tag it there and there and there. Then you bring it up even more and you get your exact recent highs. And then on the downside, look at this. Again, high pivot, high pivot, high pivot, high pivot, and low pivot creates another parallel there and all the way down here as well. Now, listen, we had this great move up on ETH about a week and a half ago. It went right into resistance. But the problem is that from that point, we didn't really make a bull flag. We pulled back too sharply and are now chopping sideways. To me, this tells me we're likely going to head a little bit lower and test the key level here of 43.50. So first support on ETH is 43.50. Because this is the center line that I'm basing all of the parallels off of, this one is a major level. In other words, if it breaks this, you're going to get a bigger move to the downside, most likely down to about 37.50 on ETH. So really, if you're a bull, you want to see Ethereum or ETH hold this level at 43.50. All right. Now, listen, a pierce of the line doesn't matter, even a small close below. But if it were to confirm a breakdown below this line, that would be very troublesome for the ETH chart. And again, a downside move would ensue. Now, if this level can hold, hopefully the idea is it can bounce off this, re-attack this upper line, break through, make a new high above 5,000, and maybe even break above. Now, if it goes above that level, what would we do? Well, we'd really start to look at other pivot points and see where the parallels align. And again, when a chart from the bear market lows of 2025, right? I mean, this was just a nasty sell-off on ETH. When you have everything based on a parallel, well, you know what you do? You just take that parallel and go even further, right? So what I would end up doing here is just say, okay, well, let's take that midpoint again. Let's bring it all the way back here. Let's bring it as far back as we can go and then bring it up to these subsequent lines, right? So again, this would be my next target. In fact, it's a beautiful thing right here, how the ETH chart has a low, a low, a low, and then look at how it flips around to a high. See that? And that just tells us we're dead on here. And even right here, I mean, high, right in here, right in here. I mean, it even goes back all the way over here, which I didn't extend it back that far, but you guys get the gist on this. And so the idea is if we ever get above this trend line here, which currently sits at around 51 and a quarter, let's say, then you would move up to about 5,500. Now you might say, well, we'll have to continue to trade in a parallel. And the answer is it doesn't, right? It never has to do anything. No chart has to do anything. But a good technician recognizes what's been working in the past and utilizes it for the future. And again, if it were to behave differently, then a good technician says, okay, now it's behaving differently. But until that happens, the best probability we're ever going to have of success in the trading or investing game is using what history has shown us works. All right. Very, very important rule when it comes back to technical analysis. All right, let's flip over to Solana now. SOL here, Sol USD. If we see this chart is actually one of the stronger charts out there. What I like about it, number one, it had this recent breakout above this range, the range 206 to approximately 215. We can call it 205 to 215. That broke up. And notice how so far pullbacks have not really been that dramatic. And in all fairness, you have a high and a higher high and lows and higher lows right along here. So that tells me that the Solana chart right now is one of the stronger charts out there. Now, if it were to really go parabolic, we all know where this would head, right? Back to our all-time high at around 295. I even have it penciled in to go higher if we take our high from 2021 and connect our high from 2025 January, then it makes sense that it would even pierce 300. So that's your upside near-term target. And by the way, just be fully understanding here, guys. that when I give my targets or my pullback levels, that's all based on short-term technical analysis, right? I'm not going to pretend that I have any clue where Solana will be in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. Could be a zillion times higher, or it could be lower for all we know. We don't know. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows out there. Projections based on technical analysis are more geared towards near term because, again, near term being a few weeks to a few months out, because the accuracy will be much higher there. Right? We have less variables. Like in 10 years, who knows what the government's doing with crypto? Do we get a government Federal Reserve stablecoin, right? I mean, you just don't know, right? There's so many variables over 10 years that you don't know how to predict. But in the short term, we can pretty much say, okay, there's not going to be, X, Y, and Z occurring. Things will behave more normally based on charts, and therefore we can project out much, much clearer. All right, so if we zoom in on this, I do see one thing that I'm paying attention to on the Solana chart. Notice this here, and look at this. All right, so you're basically inside of a parallel short-term zone. Okay, and I'm just trying to get it as accurate as possible. Notice how connects through all these lows here. Missed it by a fraction, but this is today's candle, so it could even dip into that. And then up here, pierces by a fraction, misses by a fraction, but it evens out right there. And so the reason I have this on my chart is because this will give me a clue as to the next move. As long as it stays in here, you're expecting it to make higher highs and continue up. If it breaks this trend line, guess what? Where does it go? Well, if it breaks this trend line, probability-based analysis tells us it would retrace to the scene of the breakout crime. This was your former resistance. You broke out. And if it breaks here, then it comes back to support. And at that point, right in here would be a good buying opportunity, assuming that it holds. And again, the odds would favor it holding unless proven otherwise. And then obviously, you could obviously stop out. But the point is, this would be your expected level. So for me as a shorter term trader, very simply, I'm saying, okay, the bullish bias remains on Solana as long as it doesn't break below here, which is right now around 235, 236. If it gets below there and really starts to drop, then it's probably going back to 215 to 205 right in here. Okay, so again, very simple analysis on Solana. I love that I can give you guys very detailed lines to watch. There's really no gray areas. I mean, you get a pierce, yeah, and you have to be aware of the confirmation signal. But aside from that, here on Solana, we have this simple upsloping parallel. If it breaks it to the downside, it's going back to 215 to 205, which, by the way, is not that big of a pullback, but it just gives us a basis to say, okay, that has broken, so we're expecting that downside to that level, and then we can decide if we want to buy it at that level. All right, last chart, and then we'll go over a couple others that I wanted to go over here. So XRP, notice how XRP high, lower high versus Solana, right? So again, notice how simple the analysis is here. We're not reinventing a wheel. I think, again, people do a real disservice when they have, all these crazy lines on their charts and all these different indicators. It makes it, honestly, if I looked at that, I would have never tried to learn technical analysis. Never. Because it looks like what the heck are you even looking at, right? But when you keep it simple, which is all you have to do, you just look at it and say, okay, well, we had this beautiful down, wedge pattern. We broke out. Okay, it brought us up. All right, now we've pulled back. We're basically have a flat bottom here, very clear flat bottom, but a high and lower high. And so essentially what we're doing here, look at this, guys. You essentially are creating, here's your support line, right? Right from this consolidation through. It could even put a second line under here that gives us kind of like a zone of support, right? And then essentially you have a high, lower high. And so this would be a chart that I'd be a little bit more concerned with. Solana is very crystal, higher highs, higher lows. This one has a flat bottom, but lower highs. And so I would favor that this is going to retrace into the scene of the crime here. Now, it's not that big of a fall, let's be fair, but you're looking at like 277 down to maybe 267, right in this vicinity. At that point, it's going to hit a lot of support, right? You have multiple trend lines. You even have this one down here that is slowly grinding to the upside. But again, do you see how I'm just simply using, all right, very clearly, this is your base point. So again, support 297 to 295. All right, if it gets below 295, it's likely headed down to 275 to 267, whatever it is right in here. As long as it stays here, well, then the odds kind of are neutral versus Solana still has a bullish bias. This would be more neutral, maybe slight negative bias. on the charts. One thing that I'd be watching here is basically taking this all-time or this high here and look at how perfectly that lines up, right? So we can use this line to predict if it breaks here, it's going to get another big move to the upside, whether it's this high or back to this recent high at 365. We don't know, but essentially we have a very crystal clear chart here. So just to rehash, you have a neutral bias on XRP. If it breaks 295, it's going back to 275 to 267. All right. If it keep the neutral bias, it chops in here. If it breaks above this trend line currently sitting around 312 to 313, now you're looking at your next pump to the upside. And that's, again, looking at that, you say, okay, game on. This thing should have a nice move to the upside, 10%, 20%, whatever it may be. But again, very simple lines to monitor as a trader. Now, one chart I wanted to look at was Avalanche, guys. So Avalanche is a beauty here. I shorted this with smart money crypto investors last week. By the way, we were buyers. And I don't know if you guys remember. If you followed me, you remember about 2 to 3 weeks ago, I said, guys, Avalanche is your next big runner in the crypto space. And I found that by basically finding this inverse head and shoulders, shoulder, head, shoulder, or cup and handle pattern. And once it broke here, boom, to the upside. It went from $26 to $36. Incredible. Now, that bias flipped once we hit this level here. And this is why I shorted it, right? Is because it came into this zone. Look at all these lows, and then it broke, and look at how it behaved. It got back to the scene of the crime and rejected. Boom. And so what you know is that in technical analysis, that should be resistance. And when you have an extended chart, you should get a rejection. Now, this doesn't predict where AVAX is going to go in the next 5 weeks or, whatever. But in the short term, that was clear resistance. We're in the money actually about 10% here, a little less than 10%. I'm going to look for a little bit more before I take my money and run. But the point being is that was a very simple trade. Both on the long side, I captured it with Smart Money Crypto members on the long side. We bought this. We made a great score. And then we flipped it around and said, all right, well, game over for the short term at least. Let's short this. And now we're up on the downside. And it's kind of a good representation about how swing traders can perform or outperform investors. So while an investor is still riding this, which is great, and hopefully not for a long time because AVAX is way down off of its highs from a long time ago, but near term, in the last couple months, it's up beautifully. But again, those longs, if you're held at long, are down a little bit right now, while we were able to flip it into a short. And again, my goal is to see a pullback into support, get out of the short, and maybe flip it long again. And just cool things like that really motivate me. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. Great job. I hope you guys found this useful. If you did, remember, share it with friends and family that are into crypto. The analysis is very simple, but it's very accurate. And it gives us a very good basis how to know near-term moves, which way they will go. You guys have a great one. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.